Happy September 16th. This is Spirit Week, Superhero Day, so I am super evil Dr. Jones in my very comfortable cape here, and we're looking at the Duel for North America. So this particular PowerPoint, this particular video is only going to go about 20-25 minutes because the background of the French and Indian War. We are going to introduce George Washington here for the first time, and let's just move on and do this real fast. France. So we haven't talked a lot about France yet. So France, being Catholic, they are going to be fighting their own wars between point A and point B over there in Europe. Eventually, everything's going to kind of settle down, and King Louis XIV is going to decide, hey, everybody else is getting in the act, like the Spanish and the English. No, the English not yet, but the Spanish. And so we're going to go over there. The French are going to go over there, and they're going to see what they can land grab, because the Spanish have been over here for 100 years at this point, and the French are like, why not? So they're going to go north. They're going to go north, and they're going to go up into Canada. So we've got this guy, Samuel de Champlain. And note, I'm not reading the PowerPoints because you can do that when I upload them. So I'm not doing that today. Samuel de Champlain. Samuel de Champlain, was father of the New France. He's going to establish relationship with the Indians. All right, so this is important to note. The French are going to have a lot better success when interacting with the Native American tribes. So that's almost like their hallmark compared to the British struggling, and the Spanish, killing everybody with smallpox down there in Mexico. So there you go. So the French are going to have pretty good relations, well, better relations with the Native Americans. The French government is totally in control, established by the king. So all the colonies that are coming over here, Quebec and Newfoundland and all that kind of stuff over there in Canada, they have no say in their own colonies. So taxation without representation, except to the extreme. In fact, they don't even have the right to a jury trial in Canada. So a little different. We talked last week about how the English, they came over here and they just started having babies. And so our population is going to explode. And Canada, not so much. They started with, it says, in the 1750s, they had about 6,000 people. And then if you jump all the way up to 2018, last time I looked this up, in 2018, the population of Canada is 37 million. 37 million, like total for the entire country of Canada. Canada is what, the second largest state in the entire world, the second largest country in the entire world, and it only has 37 million. So that's less than California, right? So they didn't have a lot of people in Canada. What is Canada famous for? Well, besides Canadian bacon and maple syrup and Michael J. Fox and hockey, and that was all later, but the beaver. Oh, he's so cute, look at him, he's so cute. And then, you take the little varmint and you kill him, you skin him, you wear his hide on top of your head. You make a lot of money doing that. You find those little critters out there. So the beaver pelt hats. So we have a group of guys who are going to get a group noun of the coeur de bois. The coeur de bois. And so these are going to be the traders, the merchants, the hunters. They're going to go out there. They're going to grab the beavers. They're going to do the to the poor little beavers, and then they're going to sell all these pelts. And they're going to make lots of money. The coeur de bois had big imaginations with regard to town names. For example, the Red Stick, today we call that Baton Rouge. Actually, they called it Baton Rouge back then, which is in French. And so that's the town of the Red Stick. Terre Haute, the High City, and Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines, some monks, Des Moines. The French voyageur. Ooh, voyageur. That actually makes me sound like I know what I'm saying, like I can say French words. Voyageur. Recruited Indians in the fur business. So these are the coeur de bois who are going out into the the wild. They're voyaging, right? They're going out there, and they're going to get the Native Americans involved in the beaver trade. So if they can get the Native Americans to go out there and grab some of those little critters and then sell them to the voyagers for trinkets, and then the voyageurs can then make money off that. So there you go. Let's see. Antoine Cadillac is going to found the city of Detroit. Hey, city of Detroit for like what, the 60s, 70s, 80s, in the early 90s. They were like the car capital of the world, founded by the guy by the last name of Cadillac. Coincidence? Robert de La Salle was floated down the Mississippi, Mississippi River, and floated all the way down to the Gulf. And he's going to name this land Louisiana after the Sun King Louis XIV. Robert de La Salle, and so de Salle's going to come down here. He's actually going to be looking for a delta, and there's not really a delta down here, so he kind of goes the wrong way and then ends up in Texas and gets himself killed. But what's the moral of the story? Don't go to Texas. Texas. All right. So the big map here, clearly clearly stolen from a textbook. The big map here is important for us because what Robert de La Salle did was he claimed the watershed of the Mississippi River as Louisiana. So the watershed is everywhere that it rains and that water eventually ends up in the Mississippi River, then that's Louisiana. Well, so here's the Appalachian Mountains and here's the Rocky Mountains. So if it rains on that side, the water eventually goes in the Pacific Ocean. If it rains on this side of the Appalachians, east of the Appalachians, it eventually goes into the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. But if it rains between the two mountain ranges, then eventually that water makes its way down. Now there's the Red River, the Arkansas River, the Ohio River. Eventually it makes its way down to the Mississippi River. So when he claimed Louisiana for King Louis XIV, that was a big chunk of land. All right. We're going to have a couple of wars between the British and the French. Well, I guess that's the whole point of this particular chapter. And so some early skirmishes, King William's War, Queen Anne's War, and these are between the British colonists, specifically the British soldiers who are trying to make money over here too, and the French Croix de Bois, and there you go. And it's not good for anybody. The peace terms for those different wars, we have the peace treaty of Utrecht in 1713. So Utrecht would be, let's see, that's a city in Amsterdam, in Holland, in what do we call that today? The Netherlands. So the treaty, here we go, the 13 colonies. So in red is British, in whatever color that is, blue is French, and then this is still disputed when you have the lines. And then you've got Spanish, Florida, and then Georgia, which is not yet, because Georgia's what, 1732, 33, and so that's why there's a big dispute there. All right. Let's see, it says the American colonies, oh, no, I'm not reading. So during King George II's reign, which is what's going on here, we've already talked about this a couple times, salutary neglect. The king is not pushing his rules, he's not enforcing his rules. And we're going to see that sometimes that's going to get people in trouble. And so when we're down there smuggling with the French islands that we're not supposed to, Molasses Act, then Spain's going to get involved in this, and with regard to slaves and et cetera, et cetera. And at some point in 1731, a Spanish warship comes up to a British merchant ship, and the Spanish warship, they board the British merchant ship, and there's some words, somebody says something about somebody's mama, and then somebody else says something about somebody else's mama, and the captain of the British ship, he gets his ear removed. He gets his ear cut off by a sword, and was told, if you don't start following the rules, the Spanish guy telling the British guy, if you don't start following the rules, I'm going to do this to your king. What up? And so there you go. 8 years later, the story says that Mr. Jenkins, Captain Jenkins, and here he is in this famous drawing. Captain Jenkins is taking his ear, and he's showing his ear. He's showing his ear to the Parliament over there in London, and I'm just checking. A little red light going. I was like, "Oh no! Does that say standby? Have I been talking this whole time?" And no, it says record. Okay. And he takes his ear. He takes his ear and he puts it on the table and says, "Ah, evil, evil, evil." And then they declare war, and so we call that the War of Jenkins' Ear. Can't even make that stuff up. The War of Jenkins' Ear. Now, historians nowadays say, he probably didn't actually keep his ear. He probably didn't, throw it on the table. But that's a good story. The War of Jenkins' Ear is going to be encompassed by a much larger war, the War of Austrian Succession, which is going to span, well, it's one of the very first world wars that we're going to have in world history. So here in the United States, here in the 13 colonies, we're not going to call it the War of Austrian Succession because Austria, nobody knows anything about Austria. We're going to call it King George's War. Yes. And we're going to, between us and the British, we're going to take over a little bitty fortress here in Louisburg. We're going to capture that in 1745. And we're going to have a couple other little skirmishes and battles. So it is going to be the World War, the First World War, big World War. It's going to be over here for a little bit. All right. In American history, we like to rename our wars. So let's see, or our different royals. We have King William, Queen Anne, King George I, King George II, King George III. And so various things that happened during their reigns. For us, if you only know one of those, it's got to be the one on the bottom. So King George III, he's going to be the one who gets, we're going to get in trouble with quite a bit. All right, so here we have Louisiana, and again, everything in green. Now you can really see that. Probably so. Green, so that's Louisiana, because if it rains there, it will eventually funnel down into Mississippi River and into the Gulf of Mexico. And so here's Spain, and then the British colonies. All right, so a big contention here is the Ohio River Valley. So Ohio River Valley right here. Virginia is right here. Virginia is a major player. And so Ohio River Valley, there's the mountains. So right over the Appalachian is some really, really good farmland, which we call the Ohio River Valley. I've now said that, the Ohio River Valley, now 5 times. Ohio River Valley. The Ohio, it's a critical area because it's got all sorts of cool stuff. Plus, it has all the big rivers, right? They go through there. So the British have determined that they want it, even though it's part of Louisiana. There are 3 rivers, interestingly enough, there are 3 rivers that connect, well, I say that, 2 rivers that connect to form the 3rd river. So you've got the Monongahela, I said that correctly, the Monongahela, the Allegheny, and those 2 converge to form the Ohio. And so you have 3 rivers right in a spot. You know what? If you were to build a city right there at the confluence of the 3 rivers, and then you built a football stadium and you named it 3 River Stadium, and then you named the city Pittsburgh, and then you had a football team called the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they played in a place called the 3 River Stadium, it would make sense because you're paying attention to your AP and or your regular American history teacher. I'm here for you. That's evil Dr. Jones. Oh, so today here's Pittsburgh, and today you can see the outlines of where Fort Duquesne. We'll get there later, but Fort Duquesne, was where the walls were. All right, but here's where. All right, start paying attention now because I've lost you. 1754, George Washington. Oh, there he is. He's very young here, 1754. Let's see, he was born in 32. So in 54, he would have been 22 years old. 22 years old? Are you kidding me? I mean, that's like, how much older is that than you? You guys are what, 16 and a half, 17, 22? Can you imagine being in charge? Okay, anyway, so George Washington, he's going to be given a command of a couple of hundred soldiers, and he's going to be tasked with a diplomatic pouch, and he's going to be told, go over the mountains, go over to Ohio River Valley, go talk to the French, and basically say, hey French, we're going to need you to leave because we want this land. And so he goes over in his first mission. He goes over there and he hands the French the bag and with the letter, and the French they read the letter and they're like, no, we're not leaving. So they give Washington. They give him food and warm clothes and his troops to go back over the mountains during the winter. And Washington makes it over there in 80 days or something like that, which is actually kind of a record to go that far in the snow in the winter, and which gives Washington a little bit of props. However, he is then told to go back over there and remove the French if they are not amicable to doing that, to physically remove them. So Washington goes back over, and here we go. So he goes over there, and things happen, right? He's going to set up an ambush. From the French point of view, he attacked them. Washington's group attacked them unmerciful and without warning and not playing by the rules. And of course, Washington's group was like, "We asked you to leave. You didn't leave, so we are removing you." And so a lot of French guys were shot and killed, and Washington becomes the hero. Yay, Washington! And then the reinforcements show up. So Washington runs. Now Washington's going to become pretty famous for looking across the battlefield and going, "Ooh, that's way too many," and he's going to tell his guys to back up. He's going to do this during the American Revolutionary War quite a bit, which saves our bacon quite a bit. But you'll see. So he's going to leave, and so he's going to take his group of about 300 guys, and he's going to run. The story says that he's going to go so far, and eventually he realizes he's not going to be able to outpace the French, so he's going to set up a fort. And so there's the picture. Now this has been rebuilt and made out of wood, and so we're talking about 250 years ago, right, or 270 years ago at this point. And so the fort, we call it Fort Necessity, because it was necessary for him to build some sort of wall to put his troops inside, and maybe he could hold off the French. And so they built it in just not very long, and you can kind of see it's just, stockade fence. And the story says that it was raining, and it was nasty, and it was cold, and Washington and his guys held out for 10 hours behind this fence, but eventually they basically ran out of bullets and kind of gave up, and the French asked for their surrender, and Washington surrendered. Right, he surrendered. The French, the guy in charge of the French walked up to Washington and said, "Look, I get it, you're following orders. Let's do this. You put down your guns, you promise that you'll be good, and you walk away." And Washington said, "As long as I can do that, as long as my men can walk away." And sure enough, the French guy and Washington shook hands, and Washington walked away. They let him go. They let George Washington go. Now, nobody had any idea that this now 23-year-old, this 24-year-old would grow up to be, the man. They had no idea. Had they gone ahead and, killed him, well, that'd be an interesting rewrite of history, wouldn't it? All right. 9 world wars. Just review for world history. We have the War of the League of Augsburg, the War of Spanish Succession, the War of Austrian Succession, the 7 Years' War, the War of American Revolution, the Wars of the French Revolution, the Napoleonic Wars, World War I and World War II. And the American names for those, we have different names for those, and we'll get there. All right, so the argument is that because of George Washington, we started the French and Indian War over here. Please note, if you were to ever be given a multiple choice test and the question was, who fought who in the French and Indian War? I mean, you're sitting here thinking, well, if it says French and Indian War, it's probably the French versus the Indians. No, that is not correct. It's the French and Indians versus the British and Americans. Okay? So the French and Indians versus the British and Americans. The French and Indian War. The French and Indian War is just going to be a small piece of the 7 years, small piece of the 7 Years' War that's going to be fought all over the globe. Thought I had a map here, but apparently I don't. It's going to be fought all over the globe, and mostly in Europe, but it's going to be, like I said, over here as well. We're going to go after. Okay. So in 1754. A group of colonists and the British government say, you know what, we need to get organized here because, I mean, over there in Europe, everybody kind of knows who's the bad guy and what's going on and how that's working out. But over here in the 13 colonies, you guys are all disjointed. So let's do this. Let's get everybody together in Albany and let's come up with a plan. So a whole bunch of people got together, a whole bunch of the colonies, not all the colonies, but a whole bunch of different colonies got together in Albany and said, all right, we all speak English, we all worship the same God, we all are having problems with the Native Americans, maybe we should, get together. So this guy, Benjamin Franklin, he's a little younger. This is his older picture. He was a little younger at that point. But Benjamin Franklin, who's already well known as a scientist and the newspaper guy and as an inventor and as a satirist and a sarcastic writer and all this kind of stuff. People already know him, and he's going to take the lead here at Albany. He's going to do this reasonably famous cartoon. You may have seen it before, Join or Die. So we've got the 13 colonies, or the 13 pieces. Although it's not 13 because New England, which is what, 4 or 5 states, that's just one piece that says New England. New York and New Jersey and Rhode Island, I guess it's Rhode Island, Massachusetts and Virginia, North Carolina and South Carolina. So so he's got his famous political cartoon, Join or Die. If the colonies don't get together, we're going to it's not going to work. The French are going to overtake us. So that's what Benjamin Franklin's going to push. And Benjamin Franklin is an extremely good speaker. And every time he stands up and he starts to speak, people are like, yeah, we totally agree with this guy. Totally agree. And then when he sits back down and people are like, wait, what were we agreeing on? And so it was a success, but it was a failure. To the colonists, the Albany plan of us kind of working together, to the colonists, it gave us some independence from Britain. But for some people like Benjamin Franklin, it didn't give us enough independence. And to the British, they looked at the Albany plan of us kind of getting together, and they were like, we're not really excited about all you guys kind of getting together, because if you get together, you might start ganging up on us, and that's not a good idea. So Franklin again, he writes in his papers, he says, man, guys, take a leap of faith. Let's do this. And very few people were listening to him. That continued with the French and Indian War, and so we had different battles up and down the area there. Interestingly enough, Virginia, which has quite a few Native American tribes that are going to be in their area, has the least amount of damage because of Washington. Now, actually, Washington came back, and after he was released as a prisoner, when he was released, he came back and he resigned his commission, which means he was like, okay, I've done my stuff, I'm done. And then they brought him back and said, yeah, we get it that you're out, but could you be General Braddock's aide? Could you be like his secretary? And Washington's like, all right, I'll be his secretary. And then he got dragged back in. So There you go. Hey, the 7 Years' War. I knew I had a map. See, I knew I had a map. And so we had the 7 Years' War. You've got all the different battles, and you can see over here in North America, and you can see over here in Europe, and you can see up there in India, and then even way over there in the Philippines. And all of you who took world history last year, you're like, oh yeah, the Philippines, that's going to come back, and that's going to be important. Yeah, good for you. I'm glad you were paying attention. General Braddock's going to get killed. And Washington's going to take over. Washington, in another retreat, because he's famous for this, he's going to have 2 horses shot from underneath him, which, I mean, that's sad because the horses die. But so two horses were shot, and then when he gets home, and he walks in the door, and there's Martha, his wife, and Martha's like, "Honey, you got holes in your clothes." So in his coat he had bullet holes, and in his hat he had bullet holes, which kind of says to those of us who are like, gosh, just 1 inch to the left or to the right, we wouldn't have had George Washington. So he was shot several times, but it just missed him. So there you go. We're going to continue to fight the French. We're going to try to go up into Canada and do that. The British are going to be pretty successful over there in Canada. And we're going to continue, there you go, and you can just read all that, and we're successful. All right, so why is this war important? The French and Indian War is important because again, the colonists are going to see, hey, we all kind of have the same goals. 1, survival. 2, we all speak the same language. 3, we all worship the same God. 4, we're all kind of interested in not having the British in our business. So the French and Indian War is going to kick this off. That kind of stuff. I just said that. All right. So after the French and Indian War, the French have to give up a whole bunch of their stuff. So here's the Mississippi River. And everything west of the Mississippi River is Spain, or is now owned by Spain. Everything east is going to be owned by the British. Mr. Jones, Dr. Jones. Yeah, I'm getting there. Dr. Jones, I thought that, we bought Louisiana from France, Napoleon in 18... Yeah, I know. Don't worry. And they're going to keep changing this back and forth, back and forth. But for the year 1763, this was all British, and then that was Spanish. All right, and the French aren't in the picture. They're going to come back. All right, so the French are going to get kicked out, so the Americans are going to now be able to move freely and not worry about the crazy French and or the crazy Indians, the Native Americans. Until in 1763, Chief Pontiac in Detroit. Oh look, Pontiac, Detroit. See how it all works out? Chief Pontiac is going to have an uprising of Native Americans under his umbrella, and he's going to attack some British/Americans. Killing 2,000 soldiers and settlers. So the British are going to say, "Look, we get it. We need to come up with a plan to keep the Native Americans and the settlers from encroaching upon one another's territory." So they came up with a brilliant plan. Can you see the line? Not really. The Proclamation of 1763. All right, so here's the plan. We're going to draw a line, the British King, Parliament, is going to draw a line right down basically the top of the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, and they're going to say this. In 1763, they're going to say, if you are a British colonist, if you're one of the Americans, we're going to ask you to stay, right? We're going to ask you to stay to the east of that line. Even though the British Crown owns all of this to the Mississippi River, we're going to tell you, the colonists, that you have to stay on the east side of that line. If you go across that line, then basically you're on your own, and we're not going to protect you. We're not going to protect you. We're not going to protect you if you go across that line. So here's the king telling Americans, there's a line on the floor, don't cross that line. Oh man, I wonder what we're going to do next. I'll be back for the next video here in just a second or two. I don't know, I'm kind of tired. This cape is hotter than I thought. All right, be good. I'll see you in a little bit.